Welcome back to people who've watched videos of mine before. Otherwise, welcome. Howdy. Hello. Good day. Greetings. However you want to put it. So I talked about CM Punk and AEW and what I thought was going right. So tonight I watched Raw. I watched as much of Raw as I could. Didn't see all of it. There were a couple of things that I find, and some of this is already covered on Ups and Downs with Simon Miller on What Culture Wrestling. So I don't want to tread on that because he's already discussing a lot of these rematches. He needs to have a rematch counter though. There has to be a rematch counter because it's getting bad. And it's not just that, it's that they'll take a tag match and they'll take 3 of the 4 wrestlers involved in the tag match the week before and put them in the tag match the week after. But outside of the number of rematches, what really drives me crazy is something we saw on SmackDown for a long time that would take me out of SmackDown too. Piped in crowd noise. I understand it when you don't have fans in attendance. I can even understand it when you have the weird everybody on a webcam thing. I get that. It's still weird, but it's an understandable weird. We've seen that in sports, piped in crowd noise. It is distracting, it's odd, but it's understandable. Right? It gives an ambiance to it. But when you've got an audience and they pipe in the crowd noise and it becomes obvious because you can see that the fans are mostly sitting on their hands. And yet you hear this huge cheering white noise. A fake cheer you can tell. And with SmackDown, it became, well, it got to the point where I'm pretty sure it was in a Botchamania episode where they were like, hey, here's the fake crowd noise in SmackDown. And it's the exact same noise every time. And so, watching Raw tonight, there were times where you would hear that. What gets me with it is, so it's supposed to be selling itself as a sporting event that's also sports entertainment, right? So the entertainment side. But if you're faking crowd noise, if you're faking cheers, you're masking something else. You might be masking a quiet crowd. You might be masking a crowd chanting boring. Chanting for somebody else. You might be masking boos. And they've done that for years. I know with Roman Reigns. For years there, he would come out and they would just turn the crowd noise down because they were booing him so loud. Which was kind of funny. And then they would kind of pipe in their own noise after. So the replay, suddenly it sounded like he was being cheered. I don't understand to what end though. So, how do I put this? You're watching a movie. So we'll take this from the entertainment perspective. You're watching a movie. And you're in the crowd you're in. Let's say it's a comedy. Nobody's laughing. But there's this weird fake laughing noise that keeps coming up behind you. Doesn't make the movie funny. It's sort of like how... And that actually, that's a good segue into... when you watch old sitcoms and you hear that canned laughter, man, that can be hard to sit through, isn't it? Especially when it's not a funny show. So if you're watching a show that's not really funny and they've got that canned laughter, especially when it's the exact same laugh track from one episode to another, to another, to another, the laugh track can kind of take you out of it. It was something that as a little kid, I never really paid any attention to the laugh track. Now, all these years later, and after watching comedy shows that are funny and didn't need a laugh track to tell me when the jokes are, it's hard going back to that. So when you watch a wrestling program that doesn't try to tell you when to cheer or when to boo, and then you watch one that tries to tell you this is where you're cheering, this is where you're booing, it can be off-putting, especially if what you're hearing is different from what you're seeing. So your ears tell you, hey, the crowd's crazy for this. And then you're watching and everybody's, even the people in the front row, are talking to each other, looking around, kind of bored. You might see a couple people pumping their fist. Yay. And then the other thing I noticed tonight was there were certain wrestlers you're supposed to hate, and they didn't. You could see the crowd was cheering for certain people they weren't supposed to, and maybe they weren't cheering for some they were supposed to. And it kind of takes you out of that moment. And it is hard not to compare it to AEW when you watch both. And I want both companies to succeed. I don't have any desire to see WWE go out of business. I don't have any desire to see AEW go out of business. Certainly, WWE's got record profits, and they're fired a lot of people. So those record profits are only going to go up. That increases the value of the company. But AEW isn't going under either. AEW is in a solid state right now. They have AEW Dark, they have Rampage, they have AEW Dynamite. They've got 5 hours of, I think it's 2 hours for Dark, right? So it's 5 hours of programming every week. Now there's some discussion about when they're hiring more wrestlers, is that going to cause more problems? I don't think so, because they have a good working relationship with other companies. So they could, tell their talent and go, look, we don't have anything for you this week on Rampage and Dynamite. What about if you go over to Impact and do a series of tapings there? Or are you interested in going over to New Japan? Because we definitely think that could be good for you. You could go over there for a couple of months and ply your trade there and become known with that crowd, and then you can go back over here. Whereas with WWE, they might switch brands, but that movement with other companies that I think can help isn't really there. So I don't worry as much about the roster getting bloated on AEW as I do with WWE. And absolutely, I have said this in videos before, WWE had way too many wrestlers employed. So when they're firing people, part of me is saying I'm heartbroken for the wrestlers getting fired, because the company doesn't need to fire them. And yet I get it. I get the desire to increase profitability. I also get the belief that by streamlining your roster a bit, it allows you to tighten up the storylines and make it so that it's more interesting, and there won't be as many, well, we haven't seen this guy in 6 months, where is he? Well, if you don't see him for a month or two, then that person should probably be gone. And I think, just in general, I don't think I could watch Raw every week. It's 3 hours. It's too much. And wrestling fans have said this for years. But WWE, with its advertisers and with the network, that's the agreement, is 3 hours. But I feel like that 3 hours could be utilized better. That they could manage it in a different way and plan it out in a different way. And they don't. It's and it's a tough watch. Like, up until Riddle came out, I was bored through. I didn't have an emotional reaction to any of it. Like, okay, here's an example. You've got Jinder Mahal against Mansoor, right? This could be a good match. It's not. Jinder goes into the corner, doesn't break on the 5 count, so he gets disqualified. And all I could think was, so how does this help? Like, I couldn't figure. And then I think it was Corey Graves that said, well, Jinder's on his way up now. And I thought, how? He just lost by disqualification. Oh, Jinder's turning things around. He just lost by disqualification. He didn't win. How are you turning things around by losing a match by disqualification? Like, I don't. And then, like, it was like Ali had his back to him, and he's like, oh, that's what happens, and do it my way. Okay, so Mansoor's going to either end up turning heel, or Ali and Mansoor are going to have a falling out, and they're going to end up feuding again. It just, I don't know. I just didn't feel like that advanced anything. That at the end of the match, things hadn't changed from where they were at the start of the match. And when you're writing wrestling, there should be story advancement from week to week. It shouldn't be, okay, so this week the same thing happened as the week before. And I think, honestly, it reminds me of a soap opera. So if you're watching a soap opera, and I did growing up, grew up with my mom, and soap operas were on TV a lot. So I understood how they worked. Basically, Monday something would happen. Friday something would happen. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it's just going to kind of repeat itself. And the idea was simple. That I think they understood with soap operas that people aren't going to watch every week. Or every day, I should say. So they're going to write it so that it's slow-paced and it's going along. So if you've missed an episode or two, it's okay. You didn't miss anything. And it feels like with WWE sometimes that Raw and SmackDown, both of them do this, will be written so that if you missed last week's show, it's okay. Because A, they're going to recap, and B, you're probably going to get a chance to see matches that you missed last week. It'll be, changed a little bit, but it'll basically be the same. But it means that, like tonight, Miz and Morrison finally had their falling out. That took forever. How long have Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax been on their way to a breakup? That's been going on forever. And it is a complaint I used to have with soap operas too, where I'd be like, oh man, when is this storyline just going to end? So you can tell, to me anyways, I can tell from that kind of writing that yes, there are people writing wrestling that don't know wrestling. And I don't feel that way when I'm watching an AEW show. I feel like things advance from one step to the other. I've seen a lot of people complaining that with AEW taking in WWE guys, that this is the same thing WCW did. It's not. When WCW got all of the big names from the WWE, they would try to create the same feuds over again. So you had Piper and Hogan again, Macho and Piper again, Macho versus Hogan. Yeah, you'd have that kind of dynamic too. They would try to recreate those old feuds. So far in AEW, we haven't seen that so much. It's been all new people. And I think that's really the way to go with it. And I think like, I've seen comments too this week about how, like, Daniel Bryan may go to, or Bryan Danielson now again, may go to AEW and Bray Wyatt and others. And people saying this is going to be the greatest roster in the history of wrestling. I disagree. I disagree because I think WWE for the last 5 years, I'll say 5 years, have been able to put together arguably the best wrestling roster in the history of wrestling. But those wrestlers sometimes get handcuffed. There's no better example of this than Shayna Baszler. Shayna Baszler in NXT, I couldn't stand her, but she won every match. And sometimes, there'd be this big build-up, and then Shayna would just go in and beat the hell out of whoever her opponent was and make it look pretty darn easy. Shayna had an ability to get over as this monster heel, and on the main roster, they almost gave her that, and then they pulled it away. And now she can get pinned by Nikki Ash. She can get pinned by Asuka. She can get pinned by Carmella. Could come over and pin her something. It doesn't matter now. It doesn't feel like it's a big deal to see AJ Styles get pinned. It doesn't feel like it's a big deal to see some of these guys. Sheamus loses. Not a big deal. Whereas it should be. I remember when I was a kid and I would watch wrestling, and, Hogan never lost anything. But man, if he did, that was a big deal. Even if it was by disqualification, you'd be like, wow, Hogan lost. By DQ, yep, but he lost the match. Wow, what's going to happen next? And I don't feel like right now with Raw you have that. When you have the same people fighting each other over and over and over again, and you do what's called 50-50 booking, where, okay, you're going to win this week, he's going to win next week, and then you're going to have a third match, and then you're going to win again, and then we're going to probably have a fourth match where I don't know what's going to happen. It takes that emotional impact out. I've talked about this before too. The importance of keeping wrestlers away from each other. And I hate to make the comparison of one company to the other, but it's the one that works to me. Kenny Omega and Hangman Page have mostly been kept apart since their tag team split up. They didn't have match after match after match after match, right? They've mostly been kept apart. And they've teased that, Page is going to get into it. Oh, hey, nope, no he's not. They took it away again. And so you want to see it. You want to see, at some point, Hangman Page get his revenge on Kenny Omega. And you don't know if he's going to get it or not. But this is something that's been out there, and it's been out there for a long time. And you don't see that with WWE. Like tonight you get Miz turns on Morrison. What's happening next week? Miz versus Morrison. It takes a week. There's no build. You're not keeping them apart. You're not having them go off and fight against other people. And then say a month later or 6 weeks later, then they have this big match. Build it up. And so I remember watching Superstars in WWE back in the day where you had jobbers and every match was basically your star versus your jobber. That star would get built up by beating jobbers, which is what they should be doing with Karrion Kross every week for about 3 months. Build them up, build them up, build them up. And then when that clash happens, so I'll use Karrion Kross as examples. So Karrion Kross, you build him up for months and months. You don't put him in the ring against anybody with a name for months. And then all of a sudden one night, he's leaving the ring and he comes face to face with Drew McIntyre. That works because he hasn't had interactions. But if you put him in the ring and you have him lose to Jeff Hardy immediately, and then he's right away, no matter how he's lost, well, now he's lost. So you don't have that ability to really build him up like they used to. The debate over whether or not the company creates stars has been out there with WWE for a long time. I think the ability to create stars, it's about the build. You have to make them seem like they're a big deal. You have to make it seem like it's really special. Like fans in the audience feel like, wow, I'm getting treated to a match nobody's seen before. Which AEW seems to get a little bit better. And I don't know a way out of it. Because this is how WWE... And again, WWE has record profits. They have no reason to change anything right now. They're making a absolute boatloads of money. They've got the Peacock deal. They don't really need to do anything different. And if there's anything I've learned watching wrestling over the last 40 years, if you don't have to change something, you won't. And that's not just a WWE thing. That's a lot of companies that they don't really innovate until they have to. So, if your company is a hardcore company and you've got all these guys who are, these crazy guys with the barbed wire and the baseball bats, well, there you go. That's your company and that's your style. And you don't have to innovate until you have to. And it feels like with WWE that innovation isn't necessarily there. I know when CM Punk came in, I saw a lot of people saying, okay, so Becky Lynch and Brock Lesnar is going to be calling them immediately. And then, of course, they showed up at SummerSlam. But my guess is that was coming anyways. SummerSlam's one of the big four shows. So they're going to have Becky Lynch come back anyway, especially with Sasha Banks not going. And then, the return of Lesnar. Well, that's kind of been coming for a while because you've got Paul Heyman with Roman Reigns. It's just a natural fit to eventually have Lesnar. But you can't have Lesnar come back until you've got fans in attendance because that is a money move. And fans will pay. They'll pay to go and watch if they think Brock Lesnar is going to show up. And Lesnar being there is going to create this great word of mouth and it's going to sell more tickets for later. And because he has been away for a while. Isn't that weird how that works? Lesnar's been away for a while. So while he was getting really kind of stale as things were, now not so much. All of a sudden, and even I'm looking at this going, you know what? I kind of want to see Roman versus Brock now because I haven't seen it in a long time. Part of the reason why fans go crazy over John Cena now is because he comes back every now and then. And the reason everybody booed Cena wasn't that they disliked Cena as much as they disliked him being, pushed in their faces every single day. Every week, it's more Cena and John Cena. And when the crowd booed him, WWE just went, nope, he's a good guy. He's staying we're not going to turn him. And it just kept going. And it kind of comes back to the piped in crowd noise. The idea that we know better. We have a better idea. So, am I going to watch another Raw? I don't know if I can get through it I can try. I didn't do like a full-on review with the board because it ends up feeling a lot like the ups and downs that's already being done on What Culture Wrestling. And again, Simon Miller is fantastic. He does a very good job with that. I couldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. But it again, I found myself getting kind of frustrated. The way that I can tell when the wrestling isn't working for me is if, okay, it's commercial. Oh, I'll see what's going on with the Blue Jays game. And I forget to go back. That's when you know. That's when you're like, all right, this Blue Jays game is pretty... Oh, right, wrestling. All right, I gotta go back. So, but I mean, the Jays won, so, right? Anyways, so, yeah... It's just hard because I know there's great wrestlers there and I know there's a great product in there, but just sometimes the writing makes it really difficult to fully get behind it. But I'd be interested to know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. And of course, on Wednesday, I'm kind of excited about Dynamite because CM Punk's going to be there, and I don't care if he wrestles. I don't care if he just sits in the ring and talks, or he just comes out and waves. Dude's over. Like he is at like almost Stone Cold. The Stone Cold pop is the biggest one ever. I still look back to old, when there's old clips here on YouTube of Stone Cold coming out in 99 or 2000 or anywhere near that Attitude Era. Nobody has ever or will ever get a pop like Stone Cold. The Rock is close, but I think that Stone Cold pop, it is 100% of the audience jumping to their feet. It is 100% of the audience screaming and cheering and loving everything he does. It doesn't matter who he comes out and insults. It doesn't matter who he drops. It doesn't matter whether he's a good guy or a bad guy. They loved everything Stone Cold ever did. And they've never really quite got there again. And I think if they're going to get there, they've got to let these guys build up. And maybe the answer is, while they're letting go of all these other guys, bring in some jobbers. Bring in the next Barry Horowitz. Bring in a guy that, gets his butt whooped and makes the other guy look really good. And, have more of that so you can keep guys apart. So it's not just, hey, here's the 5th time we've had AJ Styles and almost against Randy Orton and Matt Riddle. I'm not just calling him Riddle. It's Matt Riddle. But, I just find that weird that they don't have anything to buffer between the feuds. They don't have anything else. And they don't even, cross the feuds at all. They don't have, John Morrison next week against AJ Styles. And all mad about Miz. Maybe Miz comes out on the stage but doesn't get involved. Not a distraction finish or anything. Something along those... And just keep them apart. But next week, it's Miz versus Morrison. So, anyways, let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I will talk to you again soon.